Sure. Here's section 1, 500 words of the script for My Stepson Lifted My Spirits and Helped Me Feel Like My True Self Again, written for a faceless, narration-based video with high-quality emotional storytelling and no filler or repetition. I used to believe in forever. For 12 years, I played the role of the perfect wife, supportive, understanding, forgiving. My husband was once kind, even romantic. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. He stopped looking at me like I mattered. His words got shorter, his glances colder. I tried to ignore it, telling myself he was tired, overworked, distracted. That it was just a phase. But deep down, I knew better. He started taking more business trips. Late nights became normal. When he was home, he buried himself in his phone, smiling at messages he wouldn't share. I caught him lying about small things, where he'd been, who he'd talked to. I wasn't stupid. I asked questions and he got defensive. I asked again, and he got cruel. So I stopped asking. Silence became our only shared language. But the silence was louder than any fight. It ate away at me, day after day. I went from trying to fix things to simply surviving them. I stopped dressing up. I stopped planning dinners. I stopped dreaming. The house we built together felt like a prison I couldn't escape. And the worst part? No one noticed. Not even him. Except his son, my stepson. From the moment I entered their lives, he welcomed me. He was only 12 when we met, and even then more emotionally aware than his father ever was. Now in his 20s, he'd become a thoughtful, gentle soul. He still visited, checked in, helped around the house. Sometimes it felt like he was the only one who actually saw me. Not the version of me pretending everything was fine, but the woman quietly breaking behind a strained smile. I didn't tell him what was going on, not at first. I didn't need to. He could tell. One evening, after yet another canceled dinner and a voicemail from a woman I didn't recognize, I just sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. My stepson walked in, took one look at me, and didn't ask anything. He just sat across from me and waited. I didn't speak, but something about his presence made it easier to breathe. I never thought I'd feel that kind of safety again. Not in this house. Not while still wearing a ring that meant nothing anymore. Later that night, I found a message on my husband's unlocked laptop. Explicit. From a woman named Tessa. I stared at it until my eyes burned, until my heart finally stopped hoping. That was the moment I accepted it. He'd moved on long ago. I was just too scared to admit it. But as the truth settled in, so did something else, clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been loyal to a man who didn't even see me. And the only person who had quietly noticed my pain was the one I least expected. Not my husband. Not my friends. My stepson. And somehow, that changed everything. Of course. Here's section 2, 500 words, of the script, following the same tone, structure, and word count requirements. No repetition, no fluff, just direct, emotionally grounded storytelling for a faceless narration format. He didn't pressure me to talk. That's what made it so easy. He just kept showing up, bringing coffee, fixing the leaking faucet his father had ignored for months, asking if I'd eaten. It wasn't what he said. It was how he noticed the small things, the way I'd quietly stopped taking care of myself, how I kept shrinking in my own home. He never asked what happened between his father and me. He already knew enough. Our conversations stayed light at first. Books, memories, awkwardly funny moments from when he was a teenager. Then one day, out of nowhere, I laughed. A real laugh. It startled me. I hadn't heard myself sound like that in so long. He smiled but didn't comment. Maybe he knew it would break the spell. After that, we spent more time together. It didn't feel wrong. Not yet. I told myself it was just connection, human, platonic. He was kind, thoughtful. He treated me with more warmth than I'd felt in years. I began to open up. Not about everything, but enough. I told him I didn't feel like myself anymore, that I'd lost something I couldn't name. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. It was in the little moments that things shifted. The way he remembered how I liked my tea. The way he always lingered in the doorway like he didn't want to leave. One afternoon, I was struggling to reach a high shelf, and he stepped in behind me. Just close enough to help. Not enough to make me uncomfortable. But something in the air changed. I felt it.
So, did he?
Still, we said nothing. I think we were both afraid of what words might do, how they might make the unspoken real. What struck me most was how he made me feel visible. Not in a romantic sense, not yet. Just present. I had gotten used to being overlooked, to fading into the background. With him, I felt human again. I felt seen. One evening, after dinner, I thanked him for his help, for his time, for not treating me like I was broken. He looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You never stopped being yourself. You just forgot." I wanted to cry. Not because I was sad, but because someone finally understood. There was no agenda, no pressure. Just recognition. Quiet, powerful, and undeniable. I started sleeping better. I started looking at myself in the mirror again. Not to check my flaws, but to remind myself I was still here. Whatever was forming between us wasn't something we planned. It was just there, growing in the silence, nurtured by kindness and mutual pain. We were both dealing with losses that had no funerals. Him, a father who had emotionally checked out. Me, a marriage that had already ended, just without the paperwork. I didn't know what it meant yet. But I knew this. I wasn't numb anymore. And somehow that was enough to keep breathing. Of course. Here's section 3, 500 words, of the script, continuing the story with precision, emotional depth, and no repetition. The tone stays grounded, mature, and true to the infidelity genre, subtle, but direct. It happened after a fight I didn't start. My husband came home late again, reeking of indifference. I confronted him, not with accusations, just with the truth. He didn't deny it. He didn't even pretend to care. He said I should have expected it by now. That people change. That love fades. Then he walked away like none of it mattered. That's when something in me snapped. Not in rage, but in certainty. I was done begging to be respected. That night, I didn't cry. I sat alone, calm, hollow, but sure. I wasn't mourning him anymore. I was mourning myself, what I had allowed, what I had tolerated. I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. My stepson came by the next morning unannounced. He took one look at me and knew something was different. I told him I'd finally accepted what I had refused to face for years. That my marriage wasn't broken, it was over. He listened, just like always, and then said softly, "You didn't deserve any of this." We sat there for a while, not talking. The silence between us didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, charged. He reached for my hand, slowly, cautiously, and I didn't pull away. Our fingers laced together naturally, like it had been waiting to happen. I should have let go, but I didn't want to. For once, I wanted to feel something without shame. When I finally looked up, our eyes met in a way they never had before. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't guilt. It was clarity. We both knew where this was going, even if neither of us moved. The kiss wasn't planned. It was slow, hesitant, but honest. I pulled back immediately, breathless and terrified of what I'd just allowed. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me like he understood everything I was feeling. I told him it was a mistake. He said, "It didn't feel like one." I avoided him for days after that, ashamed, conflicted, afraid of what it meant. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, not because it was forbidden, but because it felt real. The warmth, the safety, the gentleness. I hadn't felt that way in years. Not with anyone. Eventually, I called him. I told him I was scared. That I didn't know what we were doing. He said he didn't either. But he also said he cared deeply. That he wasn't trying to fix me or rescue me. He just didn't want me to keep pretending I was okay when I wasn't. That night, we crossed the line completely. It wasn't wild or reckless. It was quiet, slow, respectful. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Every touch felt like an apology for everything we'd both endured. Afterward, we didn't speak right away. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full of understanding. I didn't feel dirty. I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. What we did wasn't right by definition, but it didn't feel wrong by emotion. And in that moment, emotion was the only truth I trusted. Absolutely. Here is section 4, 500 words of the script, concluding the story with emotional clarity, growth, and closure, while maintaining narrative quality, avoiding repetition, and staying true to the tone and direction of the previous sections. He didn't ask me to leave my husband. He never tried to convince me of anything. What happened between us wasn't about escape or revenge. It was about honesty, the kind I hadn't given myself in years. Still, I needed to face what I'd avoided for too long. I asked my husband for a conversation. He barely looked up from his phone. I told him I knew everything. The women, the lies, the neglect. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told him I was done. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He just asked if I was serious. I said yes, and that was it. There was no fight. Just a quiet, pathetic ending to something that had already died a long time ago. I didn't tell him about his son. That wasn't a conversation worth having. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone's image. I just wanted to rebuild my own life, piece by piece, without dragging anyone through more than necessary. I filed for separation a week later. He didn't contest it. It was like we were both relieved to stop pretending. My stepson distanced himself after that. Not because he didn't care, but because he respected what I needed.
Time. Space.
Healing. We didn't speak for a while. He moved out of town for a job offer he'd mentioned months before. He didn't leave because of guilt. He left because we both knew we couldn't build anything real if I was still carrying the weight of something broken. During those months alone, I started feeling like myself again. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned. I saw old friends. I went to therapy, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand why I let myself disappear for so long. Slowly, I came back to life, not through anyone else, but through myself. I didn't expect to hear from him again. I had no right to. But one evening I got a message. Simple, thoughtful. I hope you're doing well. I think about you often. I stared at it for a long time before replying. I'm okay. Thank you for helping me remember who I am. We met for coffee a week later. It wasn't dramatic. Just two people who had been through something unspoken, something real. We didn't talk about the past.
We talked about now.
He looked different, calmer. I probably did too. We started seeing each other slowly. No labels. No plans. Just time together that felt honest and light. Whatever this was becoming, it wasn't built on guilt. It was built on understanding, respect, and something fragile but real. I don't know what the future holds. I'm not searching for guarantees. I'm just grateful to feel alive again. I spent years losing pieces of myself to someone who never noticed I was fading. And then someone saw me, clearly, quietly, and reminded me that I was still here. That I was never truly lost. Just waiting to be found.